Glad to see everybody here.
It's good to see you, Dr. Frost. It's great to see you.
Yes, yes.
You
Wow.
know,
Big
vacation
smile.
was needed.
Yeah, I see it.
Big.
You're glowing. You're glowing right now.
I had to get out of Dallas.
You are glowing.
Oh,
Hi,
Well,
wait.
everybody.
Hey, Eleanor.
hi, Miss Eleanor.
Hi.
Thank you for
Yes.
tuning in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Man, thank y'all for joining us tonight. We are grateful. Cheryl, see you on the call. Phoebe and Saudi and Sylvia and Webb. Hey, Taylor.
Claims were tipped off by officers in the police department who suspected.
Thank y'all for being here. We're going to start shortly. So good to see you, Miss Webb. Y'all light up the chat and let everybody know who you are and the organization that you're with. You know, I always make these opportunities for networking.
Yes,
So
yes.
put your name in the chat and let folks know who you are and what you do so that we can make sure folks are benefiting from the presence of greatness on this call. So thank y'all for being here. I see Amber. Hey, Amber. Supporting your mama. That's
Yeah.
what I'm talking about.
Yes, indeed. Celebrating Life Foundation. Okay.
Sylvia does amazing work.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Well, we're gonna go on and get started if you don't mind. I know Kaze ain't gonna play with me about this time, and so I want to make sure that we are honoring everybody's time. And I am just so honored that you all found the time in your busy schedules to celebrate two amazing individuals that I'm excited to bring to you this evening. And so I'm Dr. Francois Booker, and I am honored to be a part of the Reconciliation and Restoration Foundation. We started in 2020, 2022, no, 22. And it's been a fast and furious ride. And our goal was to create this organization to support the work of Black-led nonprofits, but we help everybody. We want folks who are trying to make impact in our communities have the resources and tools to do it. And so we do a number of convenings, and this is one of the things that we do is we want to bring folks together to talk about issues that impact our community. We do an event called Black Women in Philanthropy, where we highlight women that are in nonprofit management, as well as those who are in the philanthropic space, to make sure that they connect to each other and share resources. That's really what we're about, is trying to make sure that people have access to information, to relationships, to resources. And so tonight, this is an opportunity for you to learn more about some work that's very impactful to my heart. In February of 2020, I started when I was at State Fair, Texas. Actually, that summer, we did an event called Mapping Your Future. And the whole goal was to bring people together who had been impacted by incarceration. And out of that, it started this organization called the South Dallas Employment Project. This is an issue that is very near and dear to my heart because Esteria, who will tell her story, was one of the catalysts for me wanting to figure out how to do something. And another dear friend of mine as well, who were incarcerated at the time when that event happened. They were going through their own challenges, and I wanted to make sure that when they got out, they had the resources that they needed to be successful. And so Richard Miles was someone that I had the pleasure of working with when I was at State Fair, Texas, and funding his work. And I've just been so impressed with the man that he is and what he has done in creating legacy and making impact. These are both amazing individuals. And so without further ado, I want to introduce and allow them to introduce themselves, because they are two people that I just admire and love and deeply respect, and thank God for who they are and the impact that they've had on my life individually. And so Esteria, I'm going to start with you ladies first. Tell us about who you are, and then we'll talk about your journey a bit later. And then I want Richard, I want you to tell who you are, and then we'll talk about your journey as well. So Esteria, who are you? What do you do?
Well, first of all, I'm a born again believer in Jesus Christ. And
Amen.
I am a director, the director of residential services at Viola's House. And Viola's House is a nonprofit in South Dallas where we house unplanned pregnancies for women who are 18 to 24. And we help them navigate their lives after finding out that they are having an unplanned pregnancy. But I would just have to say also, I'm a mom. I have 3 children. One has transitioned to be with the Lord. And I have 1 grandchild, and his name is Damien.
Amen. Thank you, Esteria. And Richard, who are you? What do you do?
So thank you, Dr. Francois, for this opportunity and everybody that's tuning in. I am Richard Miles, and I'm a father, I'm a husband. I am also the founder and CEO of Miles of Freedom, which is an organization that focuses on reentry from a holistic perspective. I am also one of the Dallas exonerees, one of the individuals that was wrongfully incarcerated at a very young age, went through the transitions of our system and came out. And I am blessed to be in this space with each of you all and really excited about this conversation.
So Richard, kick us off. Tell us about your journey to incarceration. What happened? What were you doing at that time in your life? Give us the story.
Yes. So taking you back to that United Way 5-minute, 5-second elevator speech, because I know that's all we got. No,
you remember how to do it.
I remember. No, seriously. So I'm born and raised in Oak Cliff. I grew up in a very spiritually guided household. My stepfather, I jokingly say when he found Jesus, he made sure everybody knew he found him. And we grew up under the church. That's where we grew up, under the church. It was like 30 days a week. That's where we was at. Really went to at school in Oak Cliff. I went to Longfellow Academy because I was, I think I was pretty educated back then. I slid into Skyline High School, super excited, in 89. And I fell in love with plastics technology. And so plastics technology was one of the vocations that I was taking at Skyline High School. And upon my graduation, I eventually graduated from a private Christian school that my parents put me in. I'm working at McDonald's making $4.25 an hour. I was planning on going to TSTC in Waco, and I told my mom and dad, and I'm ready to go. I'm an adult, tired of going to church. I got my own job, and here we go. Reluctantly, they let me go. They knew I had a vision, but I didn't have a plan, right? And so when I talk to youth, that's what I tell them. I say, you may have a vision, but do you have a plan? And so for me, within this year of me leaving home, I was wrongfully incarcerated. I had a girlfriend that stayed in Oak Cliff, and I stayed in North Dallas. And one evening, it was May 15th, 1994, I wanted to go visit her. My friend drove me from North Dallas to visit her in Oak Cliff, and she stayed in Robin Oaks Apartments. I stayed over there pretty much all day. The buses had stopped running, and so my friend drove me back to the house in North Dallas. But the gentleman that drove me back, he was going to visit his girlfriend, and his girlfriend stayed around the corner from me. Needless to say, we got to her house first. I decided to walk the rest of the way home, and that was the longest walk of my life. I stayed on Crest Haven and Bluffview in North Dallas. I was walking from University and Roper, literally about a 2 or 3, maybe 5-minute walk. And I was picked up and wrongfully arrested for a murder and attempted murder that had occurred about 5 miles away from where I was walking.
And so, Richard, tell us, what was the process after that happened, that you were picked up, wrongfully accused? What happened after that?
Yeah, so I'm picked up on the corner of on the corner of Bluffview and Lovers Lane. It's a Red Coleman liquor store that sits right there. And I had to call my friend to unlock the car door, to unlock the house door and stuff. And so as I crossed the street, police car was right there. Helicopters hit me and everything. They arrested me, asked where was the gun. I told them I didn't have any gun. They did not take me straight to homicide. And this is when I talk to my cases. When I'm training police officers, I tell them they took me to a crime scene. And what happened was a one-on-one tainted identification with one of the witnesses that had seen this shooting happen. They took 10 witnesses downtown, showed them a photographic lineup. 9 of them said the shooter wasn't in the picture. All of my alibis that I told the detective and gave them phone numbers, they verified who I was with. No gun was ever found, but I was escorted to Esteria County Jail. Bond set at $350,000. I stayed in the county jail about 17 months before I ultimately went to jury trial, where I was convicted and sentenced to a total of 60 years in the Texas Department of Corrections.
Mm.
And Richard, how did you get exonerated? What was the process for that?
You know, God works in infinite ways, and it was a lot going on and a lot that I didn't know about. So the first thing I will say that my mom and dad, God bless my dad, so he passed 6 months before I walked out of prison. But when I went to prison, we were not legally inclined. We didn't understand the legal jargon or our criminal legal system. But they met a young lady by the name of Miss Joyceann Brown. And Miss Joyceann Brown is the first African American female that was wrongfully incarcerated, and she started an organization called MAS. So here it is, my mom and dad and our church family is volunteering at MAS. My mom is crying and telling her, oh, my son is locked up. Miss Joyceann Brown starts working on the case, but she didn't have the money to finish the case out. And ironically, Miss Joyceann Brown was released through the work of Centurion Ministries, which is the innocence organization that got me out. On my end, I was sent to Cofield Unit, which is one of the largest prisons in Texas. It houses over 5,000 people on this unit. And the first person I met in the barbershop was a gentleman by the name of Benjamin Spencer. And if you know anything about the innocence movement, Ben just got exonerated 2 years ago after doing over 30 years in prison for a crime that he did not commit. So I'm in the barbershop telling Ben Spencer that I'm innocent, and Ben gave me the address to Centurion, and I wrote Centurion in 1997. They took my case up 10 years later in 2007. And what I will say, and I'll put a pin on this, one of the things that I held on to outside of my spiritual faith, my family, and my education was the fact that I met so many innocent men on one unit, not just Benjamin Spencer, but Christopher Scott, Johnny Pinchback, Victor Thomas, Andre Courage. And so I saw that this issue of wrongful incarceration was way bigger than me.
Richard, I have so many questions. I'm
Mhm.
gonna ask Esteria, because Esteria, your story, I remember walking with through your journey. So tell your story about how you were incarcerated.
Well, before my incarceration, I was an accomplished healthcare leader, and I, held a master's degree, and I worked in the community, had six-figure income. I was a national speaker, and I just had all these wonderful things that were going on. I had just come from the White House because I was asked to be on the ground floor of the Affordable Care Act. One of the healthcare leaders, Congresswoman Ada Bernice Johnson, the late Congresswoman, she asked that I participate on that panel, and eventually it became the ACA, the Affordable Care Act. But there were things going on behind the scenes. I had a lot of good things going on for me, and a lot of good things were happening in this community, the very community that I came back to serve. But no one knew the tragic feelings that I had going on the inside. There were just a few people who eventually found out, but by the time they found out, it was just I was far gone. I started to manage my mental health in a very unsafe way, unhealthy way, and I had vowed never ever to drink alcohol. Well, when I did take one sip, and this was at an event that I had gone to for years, and somebody just said, you know what, you're so wound up, just take a drink, and just relax. Well, I picked up that habit, but I never let anybody see me do it because I always did it at home. And eventually, September 28th, 2013, changed my life and the lives of the ones that I love, and also you, Francois. And I fatally killed someone in a car accident. I was charged with intoxication manslaughter, and eventually I will be charged with an aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. The deadly weapon was my vehicle. I had 3 children. All 3 of them went through St. Philip's. You taught a couple of them. And I just, had this village around me that, my children and I just knew. And, I was a single mom at that particular time. I've been divorced twice. So I was in it was a deep valley at that particular time. And I have a very, very dear friend who's on the Zoom right now, Cheryl. Cheryl Rose. She was very instrumental in helping me through that particular time. I did not know, Francois, that you were going to be as closely tied to my journey as you were. I had no idea I was going to have a jury trial. Didn't know anything about incarceration. Never had a DWI. I went full gamut right into incarceration. Stayed 18 months in Dallas County. And after the trial that I eventually had, because I didn't know it, but I had already been given a sentence. I'd already been given a 3-year sentence. But because of the nature and the gravity of the crime, I was, the family was not satisfied with what I had been charged. Well, no, I'm kind of get the word and got nervous, but they weren't happy with my sentence. They were not happy with my sentence. And so I had to go through a trial. Now, everybody else that was incarcerated in Dallas County that I knew, and I'd been there a long time, 18 months, none of them went to trial. So I didn't even know what that would look like. I was so shocked, so scared, but dear friends of mine, my village from St. Philip's, my God, so many of them just was right there. And you showed up right there in person. Dr. Flowers, Dr. Jill Wagner, Mark Jones, just so many people who showed up. And I had to go through a trial. It was a 4-day trial. And I was sentenced to prison. Now, I knew a lot of people, a lot of influential people. And a lot of those people were checking on me, and they were trying to figure out how can I get out of this. But God said no. I had to walk that path. And it was tough. It was difficult because I had to be separated from my children, my parents, and I had never been separated from them ever. But that's where my mishandling of my mental health brought me. And my mental health was that way because I had a goddaughter who I was taking care of. And we loved her so much. Her father had passed away. He had diabetes. And so I was caring for her. My parents had just found out they had diabetes. They were in and out of the hospital. I had an ex-husband who was suing me, and I was dealing with that. And then there was some things going on at work that were very challenging for me, things I had never gone through before. It should have, well, they said it should have been a good thing, but it wasn't necessarily as good to me because I was things were happening to separate me from the village that I'd known, the people who were there and who loved on me at that particular time. So I was just devastated and just completely wiped out. I've been in healthcare for over 25 years. And here it is, I killed someone, this young Black female, 30 years old, volunteer. She loved the color pink, and she was doing so many good things. And they told me in the hospital, I woke up at Methodist on Colorado, handcuffed to a bed, a hospital bed, and was told that I was being charged with intoxication manslaughter. I thought they were lying, so I went back to sleep because I just knew that was a nightmare. Till I actually woke up from a coma where I'd had two bleeds on my brain and broken arm and some other injuries. So that's where it led me to a prison in Gatesville, Texas, women's prison. And that was the biggest change and the biggest challenge of my life. But it was the worst, best experience of my life.
Esteria and Richard, thank you for sharing your stories because it's hard to relive. And for me, Esteria, because I remember you're bringing it back for me. And I'm just so grateful for who you both are, because those experiences can typically break people. And it's obvious that God used those experiences to not only transform you all to be a blessing for us and so many other people. Can you both share what was the most difficult part of navigating being in prison, and how did you stay mentally and spiritually grounded through it all? Because you both reference the power of your faith and who God has been for you through this. But what was difficult? And you've alluded to it, that being away from family. What were some other things that were very difficult for you? And how did you, again, mentally and spiritually stay grounded in it? And you?
Well, I'll just be, kind of brief. The most difficult part was the shame. It was the shame. I was the one in the family who you could depend on for knowing the resources, or maybe having a little extra money I could help you with, and having the know-how. But it was the shame. I mean, I once had stood on stages, but then I ended up in line at CHOW. It was just silence, being in a cell and not knowing what's going to happen from day to day, because behind those razor walls, it's a whole nother world. That's why they call this world the free world, this out here, because things go on inside that I wouldn't want anybody else to experience. But I will say what kept me grounded was going back to my first love, the Lord Jesus Christ. I poured into the Word of God, and I just became a student of God's Word. I enrolled in college and was working on my doctorate. And you didn't do that in prison, but the Lord sent me so many different avenues that no one else had gone through. I felt like I was, like Joseph in the Bible. And it was just so many opportunities that, I was able to find purpose in the punishment. My scripture was, it's good for me that I was afflicted and that I may learn his statutes. And so that's what began the ministry of healing. Prison was my training ground. It helped me to become more humble and provided me with that inner healing, because there were some things going on with me spiritually, mentally, that I had not dealt with. And that was the place and time to deal with.
Thank you, Esteria. Richard, how did you stay grounded mentally and spiritually? What was difficult in navigating? And you were incarcerated for how many years, Richard?
15.
How did you navigate it? Talk about that.
Yeah, I am totally blown away with Dr. Asterius. I can't even swing. I mean, she's one of our board members, and I've never heard that, right? So, man, for me, I mean, just listening to Dr. Esteria and speaking about the shame of growing up in church, my dad being who he was as a minister. My mom was very ingrained in Head Start. That's all she did was she was very high up with Head Start, and so there was this perception of the oldest preacher's kid. Yeah, I played the bongos in church. I had to sing in the choir. All of these types of things that come with being the preacher's kid. And when you're found guilty, the average person in society assumes that you're guilty. And so a lot of people stepped away from our family because of me going into prison, accused of murder and attempted murder. And so you have that aspect of it. And hindsight tells me that I experienced 4 different phases of my journey. And those 4 phases it's fear, anger, depression, and evolution. Fear being the absence of knowledge. I didn't know anything about doing time in prison. Totally scared at the age of 19, walking into the jail cell, and at the age of 21, walking into prison. I had no knowledge of it. And so fear was totally enveloped. But then once you learn the system, you learn the officers to stay away from, you learn the guys, the inmates to stay away from, you learn child time, you work in the fields. That's my job for the first 5 years was working in the field force. You don't get paid for this work. So there's this level of dehumanization. And you borderline 13th Amendment, if not walking in it. And so there's this psychological challenge that you are literally submerged in. Once you learn about the system, then it's anger. And either that's anger because of the actions that sent you there, but for me, it was anger at my mom and dad because we didn't have the money to get a free world attorney, anger at a court-appointed attorney, because so many people to be angry at But I knew that was an emotion. And if you can't do nothing with that anger, then you're gonna get depressed. And so these different levels of depression that leads to suicidal thoughts, because now I'm no longer an asset to my family, I'm a liability. And you grapple with all of those types of emotions. But going back to what Dr. Esteria said and going back to growing up in church, my spiritual foundation was really key, because what I learned was we all have faith, but we're very rarely put in a situation where we have to use it.
Mm,
When you use faith, that costs, because you're giving up the actual idea that your hands can change the situation that you're in. And we're so engaged with what we can do as people that faith is only a thought and it's not an action. And so reading the Bible and learning about Joseph, and I remember sitting in that cell and I said, man, God, okay, if you real, if this is real, I'm in the Joseph situation. And so it's nothing that I can do. Now, I did my legal work. I filed my writ of habeas corpus. And so, yeah, faith without works is dead. So, yes, there were things that I was doing, going to college, filing my writs of habeas corpus, doing all of those things, but understanding that ultimately everything is left to God. And the final thing was evolving because of the faith that I had, because of the support of my parents, because of the educational level that I had going into prison that allowed me to critically think behind bars. All of those things was really factors in me kind of navigating and surviving. And lastly, as I said, meeting so many innocent men that had been there way before I had even walked into that prison. And they was walking, man, with their heads high, and they was walking in a space of humility. And so finding them there was important as well.
Y'all stories just, even knowing them, it blows me away just listening to who you are and how you allow God to use you. Esteria, I remember when you were working on your doctorate and how you were in the newspaper, even when you were incarcerated. I remember getting an
yeah.
article, just being so proud of how you were mentoring young women and just being available, being the model that you've always been. For both of you, when you were released, talk about what that was like. I know for you, Richard, Centurion Ministries was very involved in helping that. Bow down to Cheryl Watley, because I know she was very instrumental in your case and is a phenomenal human being, and just grateful for who she is and how she's impacted so many people's lives. But I'd love for you both to talk about the release. What was that like? And what have been some of the challenges that you faced while you were trying to reintegrate back into society?
Okay, well, I'll have to say, walking out was absolutely beautiful, but brutal. When I came out, I only had 4 more months. I was sentenced to 7 years, so I only had 4 more months. But this was the beginning of the pandemic. Inside, I was safe. We were like in a sterile place because we weren't getting the virus. We were kept away from everything. And so it was out of the blue. 4 months before I was to discharge completely from my sentence and from prison, I get a message saying, you about to go home within another week or two. And I was like, no, they need to leave me right here, because that stuff out there is something going on. And so my daughter confirmed it, that yeah, they didn't want me to tell you, but yeah, you gonna be coming out pretty soon. So I was excited, but then I was skeptical, just afraid of I didn't, and a lot of people that I knew didn't understand the prison system. They didn't know how to contact me. A lot of them didn't. I had one friend who actually came from California thinking he could come visit me on a weekend, but he didn't realize he had to be on my list. So he flew all that way for nothing because they wouldn't let him in. So me not hearing from people, I thought they were angry with me. So I felt like, oh man, I'm gonna have to go out here and now just figure out how to, talk to people, or if people will talk to me. I thought everybody was mad at me. And then I started to hear all these stories about, girl, I tried to send you such and such. It was returned. And I tried to do this, and I didn't know where you were. I didn't know how to write. And then they thought I could write. And it was just, it was bittersweet. It was just such a relief. It was just, it was peaceful, once I found out that I wasn't hated, because all those years I just knew I was hated, not by you and not by those few folk who did keep up with me, but the majority of the people, because most people knew me in Dallas, and even from across the country, there was a lot of people who really, knew who I was. And so, and then, the other thing that was the biggest hurdle was starting over and eventually being without my son. And so that that right there was I'll say was the toughest part, but it was beautiful when I was able to come out.
Thanks, Esteria. Richard.
Yeah, so for me, walking in at 19 and walking out at 34.
Mm.
So interestingly, I was released in October of 2009, but I was freed February 2012, meaning through the work of Centurion, God rest DA Craig Watkins, and the creation of the Conviction Integrity Unit. So through the work of Cheryl Watley and all of them, I was released in 2009 based upon claims of actual innocence, evidence that was withheld, etc. But it was 2.5 years before they fully exonerated me because of my case being the first non-DNA, no confession case in the state of Texas. Before my case, it was only sexual assault cases where DNA was the proof of innocence. And so me coming out of prison, I think so much like Dr. Esteria, my stepdad or dad had just passed 6 months prior. And my mom, she was still living in South Dallas. And the crazy thing for me is when I got out and went to my mom, because I grew up in Oak Cliff, I felt like South Dallas had been locked up just as long as I had. It was just this condition that I saw in particular areas. And I was like, wow, some of the challenges for me, because in prison you don't talk to women, you don't socialize with the females. That's a case. And so getting out, being socially engaging to women, and that's for anybody. If you get out and you're guilty and you have a parole officer and it's a woman, you're not supposed to talk to women in prison, right? And so there's this disconnect. There's this thing there, and really trying to evolve into who Richard was outside of prison. When I first went to prison, I had a beeper. When I got out, it was iPhones everywhere. So the geographical landscape. My first job that I wanted to have was based up on H.L. Green. and I got out and HR Green were gone. You know, so every prison plan that I had was disrupted by the reality that I walked into. Um, and I was blessed to have my mom that opened up the door and let me move in at the age of 34. Um, and that was this process of deinstitutionalization that I had to go through because I went through an institutionalization going into prison. And so there's a time frame that has to occur and things that you have to become more aware of. And so, as Dr. Esteria said, it was a journey. Had it not been for family and my church really stepping in and friends bridging that gap, I wouldn't be where I am today.
You know, Richard, as you're talking, it reminds me of another friend of mine who was incarcerated. And I remember him telling me about when he would have to, be at his bed and they would ask him, "What's your number? Where are you from?" And he would have to give his number.
Mm-hmm.
And he would always say, "I'm from X place." He would not say his number.
Mm-hmm.
And the guard was like, "Why won't you say your number?" He said, "Because I'm not going to identify with this place."
Mm-hmm.
And it goes to your point about the institutionalization that
Mm-hmm.
happens, that you become your number.
Yeah.
And that becomes
But
such
they
a
want-
part of your identity.
Mm-hmm.
Go on,
Yeah.
Esteria.
Yeah, that's what they want. And not
Yes.
even just that. For women, it's the dignity. You lose your dignity because you have men who are also officers. And when I went in, probably just like Richard, there was this place called the Dog Pound. And I was in the Dog Pound. And this was a cage that was big enough for it to have, about 4, 5, 6 beds in it. And you didn't take a shower inside that cage. You had to come outside. And typically it was open, not necessarily open where there wasn't a door, but above they could see you. And to actually have a man watching you unwanted, and then you might have to ask that same man for some tampons. You might have to ask them for all, the kind of things that you consider that should be, private. And they try to drill that in you, that number. And I said it, but that was not my number. That was not me. I said who I was every day. And they didn't like you smiling and talking too much. And I wasn't supposed to, but I did. I smiled and and I just called it my smile ministry. I would go around and just smile to people just to try to give them something good or something nice to just even think about, because yeah, it's they try to just degrade you. And being female, it was tough. It was tough being there, especially when one thing that Richard could probably say too, when they look at you, they think that you've been there before, so you should already know all the rules. So if somebody's not right there by your side, or somebody that is trying to be friendly with you, explaining to you what this and that means, then you don't know. And then you end up catching a case, and case after case, you might not see parole because you're being defiant is what they're saying. So yeah, it was just a place where it was just embarrassing, very embarrassing to do that. But I held my head up high, and I would tell these young women are just like the ones that I serve now. I would tell them that yes, you can mother your children from prison. Yes, you can fight that battle from prison. And it's a reason why you're here. It's a reason why we met. But God, you could have been somewhere else. And so it was just a great opportunity to be able to assist these young women and not only was I assisting them, they were assisting me, because God I would have never known young people, young women going through some of the things that they had gone through, that led the trauma that led them to the place where we were.
You both mentioned the importance of support. And so often, you're right, people walk away and aren't there for you in these moments. Why is it important for us to support folks who are incarcerated and impacted by incarceration? Why is community not just important on the outside, but also important there?
Um, I'm going to say two things, and I'm glad you said community on the outside and inside. So it was about 11 years in, I had turned 30. And I remember my mom and dad would come visit me a lot. And my mom asked me one time, she said, Richard, when you look out the window, what do you see? And I'm like, I see the barbed wire, I see the rec yard, the people working on the rec yard. And she was like, Richard, next time you look out your cell window, I want you to look up. And as cliche as it sounded in our visitation, I went back and I did it. And physically changing what I was looking at, changing my perception. It allowed me to look beyond the physicality of incarceration and look to what lied beyond it. The fact that 98% of people that are incarcerated will return home is more than enough reason for us to want to support individuals that are going through incarceration. The fact that our prison system was only created to be a punitive measure for criminalistic behavior and no rehabilitative formulas within the system is more than enough reason for us to want to provide resources for individuals that are going through the system and have reached a point of redemption, but not rehabilitation. Because that's what happens when you go to prison. You reach this point of redemption, really analyzing what sent you to prison, and you come to this point of internal peace and spiritual peace, that you are redeemed at that point in time, but due to the lack of true rehabilitative resources, you can't fully transition. And so I think it's that part that society hasn't understood yet, because when you go to prison, you're condemned, but you're not provided resources to re-enter into society.
Esteria, any thoughts on community and the importance of it?
Well, boy, it's so important. I was, involved in community so much, prior to that. My children were involved, and I loved people, that were in community, and then just going to prison, you're in another type of community. Coming back, you have this expectation that, you hope people will understand. And oftentimes they don't. Oftentimes they don't forgive. My situation was very different from Richard's, but I did my time. I did what I was supposed to do. I was a good citizen while I was inside. I did everything that was expected of me. But I gained really nothing as far as skills or gained anything as far as something rehabilitative that would have helped me even more when coming out to better my life. So I'm looking at the people who I'm leaving behind, and they come out and they're so very lost. I did have a connection. Number one, I did have my education. Still, a lot of times doesn't matter if you have an education. You got that felony, that's who you are, and that's going to be a tagline with me, and rightfully so. But you don't always feel fully embraced like you really want to be when you come back into just the mainstream community. Unless someone has actually gone through what you've gone through, they don't understand. You want somebody to say, okay, maybe I haven't been there, maybe I'm not, I can't be as empathetic, but tell me, take time and explain to me some of the things that you've been through, and maybe I can, help you with, some kinds of resources. I mean, Francois, you were ready. You were on it. You knew the day I was coming out, and you were ready to let me, you had a list of all the resources, including Richard, Miles of Freedom. I didn't receive that from anybody else. Anybody else. Everybody should have a Dr. Francois in their life, but we don't, and what do we do about that? We need to spread the word. We need to at least try to be understanding, and coming to Miles of Freedom and just having a visitation, or going to Trinity Restoration Ministries, where they have females, and they deal with reentry for females, participating with churches like Cornerstone, and churches that really embrace you and try to walk the walk with you. It's not that you have to have been there, but just want to support, just want to give, because so many people are afraid. And I must say, I was one of them. I was one of those who was afraid. But now I know, now that I know better, I've got to do better. And that doing better means to get out here and join and be a part of communities. I was big in healthcare, and all the different activities, that were in that space. I've taken that, but now I am even more so into reentry, incarceration, going back into the prison system. I have been back in at least almost a dozen times, and half of that time I was going to death row for females, and ministering to them, and still continue to do that. Inviting those people who are curious enough to just want to see what it's like. And then maybe they'll, participate. But I tell you, community is so key. You want to see that even when you're inside. You have visitors who come, and churches who do come and minister to you. A lot of times they don't look like you. You don't find a lot of the volunteers who come in visiting with the people who are the most incarcerated demographic there. And you want to see that. Even on my trial, I couldn't keep anybody who looked like me on my in my jury. They all had excuses. So it's community that is what helps us to stay away from these kinds of spaces and help keep the next generation, those next, and even the ones who are there now, help them feel supported and maybe not make that same mistake again, or just to show that kind of that concern that they need. So community is everything. It really is. If we're gonna make any changes in the prison system and dealing with incarceration, it's huge.
Richard, you took your settlement. As we talk about community, you didn't just stay internal. You took your settlement and started Miles of Freedom, which a lot of people probably would have took their settlement and said,
Yeah.
y'all took me through all of these changes, goodbye. But you took that and started this organization. Talk more about what was the catalyst for you to say, I want to now help others in this space and start this organization, and talk about the work of Miles of Freedom.
Yeah, in June of 2009, that's when my dad passed. And it was interesting that after I left the chapel, I had been locked up on Cofield then 15 years. And the support of the men now, innocent and guilty, man, I'm talking about, they really came in. And so the men on Cofield unit, good, bad, in between, we became family. And it's just like the family reunions that you have. You have Uncle John that you're gonna stay away from, and you got Uncle Brown that you always like to see. So that community that I grew up in, that really formulated a lot of my inner being, became a part of me. And one of those people was Mr. Aubrey Jones. Mr. Aubrey Jones, he passed away in 2017, and he was also wrongfully incarcerated. And I met him on Cofield unit, and we used to always see the revolving door of the prison system, and how somebody would get out and they would come back and they would be like, "Man, it's hard out there." I'm like, "What do you mean it's hard?" I had never walked those shoes. And Pop, I call him Pop Aubrey, he would always tell me, "Man, when you get out, man, we're gonna create an organization and we're gonna do this." And so when I left in 2009, Pop was still locked up. We stayed on the same dorm. I gave him my stuff, and Pop said, "When I get out, I'm gonna come look for you." So I'm like, all right, all right. Fast forward, he made parole and he got out. And God works in infinite ways. After he got out, I shortly thereafter got exonerated. So for me, I was working at the hotel for 2.5 years, making $10 an hour. And, I was maintaining, I was staying in Spruce Square apartments. It was going down. And so small, but sufficient. And when I got exonerated, it blew my mind. You know, full transfer, it was like a $1 million check, and I thought I was Rick Ross. And so I had to get control of myself. You know what I'm saying? It hit you, it was like, whoa. But at the same time, when I saw this tangible blessing, I understood that it came from a very dark place. And it hurt to receive what I got, because I wish I had got it through some type of scholarly degree and understanding criminology and all of that. But I had to walk in those shoes, and I thought about the men that was incarcerated and how my dad volunteered me to start a Bible study on Cofield. So I'm literally serving the people on Cofield through the word. So I'm already in the shoes of servant leadership. And so getting out, 2.5 years walking those shoes, and I finally got the check. And I remember sitting down that night and I was writing down what I buy my mama a house. She got out of South Dallas. Give me a house and my tithes and miles of freedom. And that was how I broke down my compensation. And my thought was, how can $1 million save 1 million lives? And we've been doing this since 2012, and it's been an ever-growing mission. And I'm just excited for everything that we do, from the case management at the Martin Luther King Center to the lawn service that's our earned revenue and training pad, to the job readiness workshops that's hosted by Brian, the food pantry, and even Miss Eleanor that's been slid on this call, who is our amazing fundraising coordinator. How you doing, Miss Eleanor? Yeah, so but that's what we do. We've been doing this 13 years, and I just felt that I think so much like Dr. Esteria, coming out of prison, you don't feel like you fit in society. And you got to create who you are. Because nobody really wants to accept you. And if you can create who you are in a positive manner for the good of somebody else, then that brings way more value than any check that a job can give you, you know. And so it was those things that led to Miles of Freedom.
When you both think about your legacy, what do you hope people remember the most about your story and the impact of your work?
Well, I want them to remember that I didn't just survive, I served. And I want them to understand that even in tragedy, you can build triumph. Even in the mess that I was in, I could build a message. When I was released Mother's Day weekend 2020, May 2020. It's coming up on that same weekend. And God told me if I walked the walk the way I was supposed to with him, he would take care of my children. My parents would see me walk out, and my 3 children would see me walk out. And they did. And we celebrated and fellowshiped. And I didn't come out the same way. My children could see that. It wasn't that I was, just mentally messed up, but there were some things I did that were just a little bit slower. I had to think a little bit longer sometimes. And I paced myself. They weren't used to that. Because I was a storm. It was that Esteria storm is coming through. It's just twisted, and I would get things done. But I do remember my daughter, my middle child. I remember they came to visit me in prison, and she said one thing. She said, "Mama, I know prison is not supposed to be a good thing, but you just look so peaceful. You just look like you're at peace." And I was. I gained something in prison that I don't know that I would have gained it any other way. But just like Richard says, God works in many, many ways. And 7 months after being released from prison, my son, he developed COVID, and eventually he died. And a lot of y'all on this call were with me and praying with me, thinking that, this wasn't going to be like that. But it did. And to lose a child is just unimaginable. And it's so unnatural. And that was my only son. And the way he left here, it was tough. But the day before my son left, he passed away. We were reading Luke, and we were reading one chapter a day leading up to Christmas. He passed away December 18, 2020. And we just started talking about heaven and talking about, you know, what was going to be there and what was it going to be like, and just explaining to him, you know. And me and my mother were in the room talking to him because he couldn't talk. He had that trach in his throat, and I was, you know, still not sure about how things were going to go because I was so nervous about his sickness. But I just knew God was going to continue to heal him. He did heal him, but he healed him on the other side. And so just knowing that, you know, I came from one tragic, you know, death with my victim, and then my baby, that happened. If I had not had incarceration in between those two, I wouldn't have been able to make it. And I wouldn't sit right here today to tell you that you can make it after incarceration. It can be done. But I see my son and the loss of my son as, it might sound crazy, but it was a blessing so that I could be able to give even more of myself to these young women that I see every day. They help keep me grounded, humble, and just peaceful, being able to show love. So this, I started a foundation. I actually started the foundation before I went in. A lot of people don't know that, but it became more purposeful with me after I got out. And so I started to, I received some funding. And so I help young women. I started my counseling LLC. And so I help young women and some men, those coming out of prison and those coming out of traumatic situations. I help counsel them and also provide them with small little grants to help them with, you know, just getting started, maybe a bed, or maybe giving them some clothes, or maybe something just to, you know, put a down payment on something. Because I'm working for Viola's House, my nonprofit is not as active, but what I do now is spend my time with Miles of Freedom, because I know there's purposeful work still going on where I can continue in the mission. And my nonprofit is still there. It will maybe eventually ramp up, but I would say that I want to be remembered for participating in ways in organizations like Miles of Freedom, being a part of what Richard has built, and continuing on with that. And I'm just going to continue to do what I'm doing, and which is writing a book, Francois. I am writing that book. I am. It's taking me a minute. It's taking me a minute, but I'm getting there. I'm getting there. And you're going to be the first one to read it. But,
I can't wait.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of how I want to be remembered.
Man, you both are so strong. And Esteria, I've watched you through some tough situations. I don't think you realize, both of you, how your strength blesses others. Richard, I remember when I first met you, I told you I was stunned by your calmness and the peace. Because I told you I'd probably walk in rooms and tear up tables. People just like, why is she tearing up stuff every time she walking in? She's throwing pens and backpacks at people. What's wrong with her? And the fact that you have just been this calm and this support to me and so many others. Esteria, I watched, you know, what you went through and walked through it, and it changed my life. Watching your strength. I mean, your story is oh girl. And to have witnessed it all these years and been blessed to be a part of it, and your wonderful babies on the call, and I'm just so grateful for what you both have shared and who you are and how you continue to pour out and give to others. And so the last question I have before I open it up to the audience is, how do people support you now? And what is, and Richard, I'm being asked, did I ask you about your legacy? And making sure we talk about what is the legacy that Richard Miles and Miles of Freedom will leave. I want to make sure I give you that.
No, you didn't, but I was actually trying to think, because I've never really thought of what a legacy would be to leave personally for me. But as Dr. Esteria was talking, I will say that I would hope that people would say that I was a light and that I stayed in the boat. And I say that for two reasons. We as believers are not meant to be fire. We're not meant to consume. We're meant to guide. We're meant to illuminate. And if I walk into spaces and I illuminate the space, then I feel I'm walking in my purpose. And when I speak about staying in the boat, I think about the disciples. And we always talk about Peter, but what about the ones that stayed in the boat, that stayed praying, that didn't? So we can't move spontaneously all the time. We got to stick with what he told us to do. He said, get in the boat and go on the other side. Peter was just tripping, you know. So we forget about the ones that stay the course, you know, that hold the ship together. And so that's what I want people to remember.
Amen. How can people support you both now? And what is the call to action that you want the audience to do? Supporting Miles of Freedom, Esteria, supporting your counseling, what can, and your nonprofit, and sowing into you as you sow in others. What does it look like? What can people do?
I just want to say, before Richard says anything just yet, I just want to say the call to action is to see the unseen. Recognize that there are those who will be returning. They are. And so we need to be ready. We need to be prepared. We need to give and pour into, not just with the finances, definitely with the finances to Miles of Freedom, but also with the time and your talent. Time, talent, and treasure. That's what I'll say. We need to be able to do that. You know, I can't say it enough. Women coming out of prison, it's tough. You know, they expect, you know, oh, a man can do this and a man can do that. But typically women have gone in because of their mental health. And a lot of them, they do come out, their mental health is so messed up because they've seen and had to experience so many different things. And then to be disconnected from your children. There are many different things that, you know, they can do. Connect with a Miles of Freedom. Connect, you know, with us individually. Come and participate. Just see what's going on through case management. See what's going on with when a person gets out of prison and they find that their footing and they're led into the miles of freedom. It's huge. The task is huge, but if enough of us get in there, like Richard said, get in the boat and stay. The boat gonna be big eventually, but we get in there and we do what needs to be done. It can be done, you know, and the weight won't be so heavy, you know, because there's just so many different aspects to it all. We haven't even touched on everything that goes on, but that's what I say. See the unseen, and also support Miles of Freedom. Come out and see what they do. See what we do. See what, you know, is really happening. And then come back and see how you can serve.
Richard.
You're going to get a blessing at the next board meeting. I don't know what it's going to be, Dr. Esteria, but I wasn't thinking that you was going to roll us out like that. But I mean, I appreciate, thank you, because it's,
Oh, yeah.
oh, it is so many amazing, it's so many amazing organizations that's doing this work. But I mean, however, last year we worked with over 1,000 people coming into our doors. We assisted approximately about 500 individuals securing employment. Over the past 13 years, we worked with a little bit over 2,200 individuals just returning home from prison. We got about 25% of those individuals that we serve are women. And so we are seeing an uptick in the women population that we work with. But also last year, we experienced the headwinds of elections. We experienced the headwinds of funding, so much like so many grassroots organizations and nonprofit organizations in the community. We experienced those things. I am super excited that we do have a board that is progressive, that is growing, but we also have room to onboard individuals. And so there are particular talents and skill sets that we are missing and that we can further thrive on. And so board engagement is always an opportunity. Assisting in the food pantry, we distributed 41,000 bags of groceries last year in the food pantry, over 3 million bags, over 3 million pounds of groceries since 2019. Last year, it was about 2,000 unduplicated people that received groceries, over 200 zip codes. So the food pantry is a space where we allow corporate engagement and volunteerism to really kick in and be active. And Miss Eleanor would not allow me to come back to the office without talking about our push to just grow our individual donors. You know, our individual donors, to me, it's not a one-time transaction. It's an opportunity to build a collective relationship that addresses issues that we are just most pressed about. And so that's another thing, is just building up our individual donors, coming out volunteering. Think about seats on the board and advocacy. Policy and advocacy is our next step. That's our next phase to step into. And so we're always willing to stand beside people and walk with them that's addressing those issues.
Amen. Y'all were just amazing. I want to get an audience an opportunity in our last few minutes to ask any questions that they may have of you. People are commenting and saying that the stories are amazing, that they really enjoyed hearing from you both. You give a new meaning to the phrase, "Still I Rise." Any questions from our audience or comments to these amazing human beings? And if you got your hand up, I can't see you, so just talk. Eleanor, are you trying to say something? Okay.
I was trying to find my microphone so I could activate it, but I am just, you know, of course, I'm always impressed by Richard. It seems like after being around him, it'll be 2 years now, that I would, would know enough and not be moved as I am every time I hear him speak. And I'm just so humbled by the fact that I'm, allowed to be able to work in a setting like Miles of Freedom, and to work with someone like Richard. Richard is, 20 years my junior, but he's much like a mentor to me. And I really appreciate that. Dr. Esteria, I knew nothing about you. We sat together at the St. Philip's luncheon most recently, but I knew nothing of your story. I am just completely full with, just everything that you said. And I admire you and just love you. And thank you so much for being an influence on so many people, and just for, staying strong and resolute through everything. And I just, again, I'm just full from hearing your story. Thank you.
So kind.
Thank you, Eleanor. Anyone else?
By the way,
Starting-
So
Richard is due a happy birthday. He was 50 last week.
yes, he was.
Happy birthday. Welcome to the club.
Your story and how you face reality. You don't know, Miss Miller. But I'm saying, Mr. Miles, don't know how that resonates so much with other people, and how if you know God, you continue to walk with him, how he continues to carry you through. And I'm so blessed to be able to know Miller, be with her, hear your story, and to the other people. She knows my story, and I just want to say, continue on the good works. And Mr. Miles, I would love to know more about your organization. I am a nurse, and I am on several boards. And Mrs. Esteria, Dr. Esteria, I deal with her place, but to continue to work forward. I'm not an incarcerated person and have never been, but your stories resonate with me, best believe. And to walk the journey that you have to, whether you're in there or you're not, you still got family members out here that walk with you, be with you, love you, but know how God continues to maintain you. And I just want to say thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you, Scotty. Yeah.
And we will reach out to you. I will send you some information on Miles of Freedom. I did hear that plug, so we will get.
Yeah, she teaches CPR at our church, Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship, and she also trained my staff at the maternity home on CPR. And also Richard, she went with us when we went to death row, and she was one of the ones that Chance 490. She supports us, and she went in and she actually taught with a group at the unit in SIG. Yeah, she was a fish out of water. she did it. She did it. She had a willing heart. Yes, she did.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
And Richard, put in the chat how people can reach out to you.
Yes.
And Esteria, if you want to share your information as well, please put that in the chat so people can connect to you. I want to share, there is an initiative called Clean Slate that is coming up in the legislature. And it is a way to make sure that folks who come out, their records don't hold them back from opportunities to get jobs. And so I'm putting that in the chat. Please check it out and learn more about Clean Slate. And especially there is a group of organizations and individuals who are involved with it here in Texas. So even if you're not here, it is national, but there is a move to try to implement that here in the state of Texas. So please take a look at that in the chat. And if you can't see it, go to cleanslateinitiative.org to learn more about the initiative. Again, it's cleanslateinitiative.org. So any final comments or questions that you may have for our amazing panelists who just constantly blow my mind every time I listen to them?
Thank you, Francois. Just, oh God, I love you. Kaze, I always say it wrong. Kaze, I love you. Doing a wonderful job. Amazing young woman. I just wonder where you get it from.
I don't know, Esteria, they're still out. But I'm so grateful to you, Esteria, Richard. Y'all have been, again, such a blessing to my life. And any opportunity I get a chance to champion you all, I am always going to do it, because you don't realize what you do for people when you are in their presence. And the wisdom and love and compassion, it is obvious that God is working in and through both of you. And I'm grateful that I get to benefit from it. So thank you both for being here. I want to thank you all who have been on the call today. Thank you for listening in and learning. This isn't just for you to hear and go, what a great story. We need you to move to action and support folks in our community who are going through incarceration and families who are impacted by it. We got to be here for each other and be community to one another and for one another. And so thank you for being a part of the community tonight on this call. Again, I appreciate y'all. Have a great night. Richard, Esteria, blessings to you both. I'm grateful.
Vice
Thank you.
versa.
Thank
Blessings to you as well.
Have a great night.